The roar of a lawn mower and edger running at the same time rudely disturbed my Saturday morning sleep. A groan from the other side of the bed showed that I wasn't the only one irritated. Darla sat up and swung her legs over the side of the bed. She seemed to stretch and yawn at the same time. "Sorry, Brian, I completely forgot. The boys wanted to start work in the yard early so that everything would be ready for tonight." Heading to the bathroom, she shook out her blonde hair. 20 years later, she still looked good. Today was my birthday. It was a tradition to have a barbecue and invite the whole world. Well, it wasn't that bad, just family, friends, and neighbors. For a birthday party, it was a little over the top. We had to borrow several grills and smokers to get through everything. Even when I thought it was my day, I always felt obligated to do the bulk of the cooking. I wasn't very good at it, but it worked out as expected. The best part about it was that the cook always had a cold beer in his left hand. I had to keep my right hand free to cook the meat. "Do you want to receive your birthday present now, or do you want to wait until the evening? Shower warm and ready." Darla smiled, peeking out from behind the bathroom door. There was no nightgown, and she was playing coy. "See you tonight, little lady. Right now, I'm going to go down and help the boys. I'll take a shower later." Todd was 18 and would be leaving for the University of Texas in 2 months. Terry was a year younger and already had a scholarship to Auburn. They were good sons, and I gave Darla credit for raising them right. About the only thing I gave them directly was a comfortable home and a good work ethic. I always regretted not being a better, more involved father. We spent a couple of hours pretty thoroughly tending the yard and patio and then fired up some grills. I wanted to prepare the ribs for smoking first. The burgers, hot dogs, and steaks could be cooked as needed, but the ribs needed some pampering. Todd started the smoker while Terry spread the dry puree all over the meat. Hell, the way things were going, I could probably sit back and let them take care of everything this year. Darla arrived just as we finished all our prep work. Her 2 sisters were to come to help her with everything she needed. Today, there were more than 50 people to feed. It's funny how friends come when there's free food. I was 40 years old, but I still felt like I was 20, and next month Darla and I will celebrate our 20th wedding anniversary. It was a good marriage. The sex was not the same as in previous years, but still great. This seemed to stop about a year ago, shortly after Darla started working. The fear of an empty nest drove her out of the house. I was happy if she was happy. We didn't need money, but she needed communication. The boys and I took a shower. I had a new shirt especially for this occasion, which my mother brought at the beginning of the week. It wasn't really my style, but I had to wear it. I looked like a Hawaiian pimp. Darla wisely insisted that I wear an apron. Of course, I had a nice apron that said, "Don't kiss the cook." It didn't take long before our guests began to arrive. Some brought platters of food, some brought gifts, and some brought drinks. The weather was fine, and the day promised to be wonderful. Darla looked gorgeous and, as usual, was the perfect hostess. She would have turned 40 next year, but she could easily pass for 30. She has maintained her figure and appearance. I was looking forward to a few exotic weekends and vacations after the boys left. I watched as she flitted between the tables, making sure everything was perfect. An ideal wife and an ideal mother. What more could a man want? Finally, the excited crowd began to eat. Plates of food suddenly appeared and disappeared all over the yard. Most guests brought their own outdoor furniture, which made things easier. Beer was in one trough and soda was in the other. I knew the cake was safe in the kitchen, awaiting its moment of glory. I don't know where it came from, and I definitely didn't recognize it. He was tall and wearing a dark blue jacket. He stopped at the edge of the party area, leaned over, and said something to one of the neighbors. She pointed at Darla. He thanked her and walked towards us. Darla noticed him approaching and seemed to feel a little uneasy. I didn't say anything as he walked past me. "Darla Connors?" My wife nodded and said, "Yes." He handed her an envelope, which he took from the inside pocket of his jacket. Darla Connors, you've been served. That's all. He turned and left as quietly as he had appeared. Of course, by this time everyone at the party was watching. Darla stood motionless. There was no emotion on her face. She looked at me, slowly turned around and walked back into the house. I watched and said nothing. The usual chatter of the guests turned into muffled mutterings and whispers. In a desperate attempt to break the spell of the moment, I screamed, "Anyone want some more ribs? Come and take them." Todd and Terry came up to me. "What the hell is going on, Dad?" Terry tried to be restrained. All I could do was shrug. Todd walked into the house and I touched his hand. He fell silent as I shook my head, indicating no. "Why don't you guys check if we need any more beer or other drinks?" When the conversations in the yard began to return to normal, I relaxed a little. After 10 minutes, I decided it was time to talk to my wife face to face. I didn't have that opportunity. "Dad, Mom leaves in the Mustang." Terry pointed to the front of the house. My black Mustang convertible was speeding down the street faster than it should have. The backyard became quiet again as everyone watched her walk away. Darla usually drove the minivan, but it was parked inside. The Mustang was at hand. There were a lot of unanswered questions, but I guess they will have to wait until my wife gets home. After that, everything went downhill. Darla's sister Peggy brought out the cake, and I made a feeble attempt to look happy. Without Darla, everything seemed to be overcast. Friends and neighbors were the first to leave. The families lingered a little longer, but eventually there was nothing left to clean or wash. Surprisingly, Darla's sudden departure did not become a topic of conversation. Everyone took some pains to avoid any mention of it. I was alone with my two sons, and the house was quiet. They both looked at me, waiting for some sign or explanation. I had nothing to offer. I sat on the couch alone while they went to bed. In the morning, I was still there. Todd and Terry got up early and started the day by returning grills and other supplies to their neighbors. The smell of fresh coffee woke me up from the couch. Darla didn't return. Whatever was in that envelope must have been very important. I called her cell phone several times, but it was turned off. Of course, I stayed up half the night trying to figure out what was going on. The boys finished putting everything back in place and left. It was not difficult for them to understand that I wanted to be alone. A long hot shower helped, but not much. There wasn't much I could do on Sunday. Tomorrow I might find out if the police can help. I didn't know any cops or detectives, but I had a few friends at the courthouse. Hope they can help. We had one credit card and one debit card. The debit card was used for everyday purchases and the credit card for larger purchases. We paid monthly for both cards. If Darla had problems, she would have to take advantage of them. It took a couple of days for credit card purchases to arrive in the bank account, but debits usually took a couple of hours. First, I checked my credit card activity and found nothing. The debit card was a different story. About 2 hours after Darla left the house, she bought gasoline at the Pennsylvania-Ohio border. 2 hours later, she received some in Illinois, and the last transaction was an ATM in Cedar Rapids, where she withdrew $300. I was finishing my third cup of coffee when I realized she wasn't coming back. She wasn't just killing time, she was running away. I loved my wife and didn't want to do anything that would hurt her, but I also didn't want to encourage her in whatever she did. Even though it was Sunday, I was able to cancel both cards within 10 minutes. About an hour later, I called the police department and reported that my Mustang was stolen. I didn't tell them that my wife took him. I explained that there was a bank card in the car and that it had been used in 3 states heading west. I felt bad about lying to the police, but I thought it was the only way to get some attention. It was weak, but they seemed more interested in getting rid of me than asking about the circumstances. I quickly took inventory of the house, and the only things that seemed to be missing were her purse and a small travel bag. I had no idea what she packed in it. For several hours, I debated with myself about what to do with her cell phone. Since I canceled the cards, I was hoping that would make her call home and explain everything. I never found time to have lunch. Before I knew it, it was time for dinner, and my sons brought out a couple of pizzas. There was a ton of food left over from yesterday, but I have to admit that the hot bites were delicious. We finally found time to talk about what happened. I told them what I knew, and they offered support. That night, I slept in my bed. Darla never called. Todd and Terry worked during the summer for a local tree trimming company. It was hard work, but they seemed to be good at it, and they liked the macho image that came with the job. I waved to them from the porch as the Jeep started down the street. After finishing my coffee, I returned to the empty house, still trying to figure out what was wrong. I called into work and took a week off. I was already a little tired of this work, but they paid well for it. I was delivering gravel from one of the local quarries. It was hot and dirty, but there weren't many decisions to make. I simply picked up the cargo, sent it, and received my salary. Right after Darla started working at Prescott Casualty Company, we attended several company events. They hosted parties and picnics where I met some of the people she worked with. I just realized that for the last 6 months or so we haven't attended any more meetings. In fact, she never even mentioned them. They were important to her when she first started working at the company, and then suddenly they weren't. I'm not very good at remembering people I meet, but I remember Bob and Margie Gilson. Bob was a carpenter and Margie worked in the same office as Darla. It seemed like Prescott's company could be called. Margie, this is Brian Connor. Do you have a minute to talk? Hello, Brian. I am very busy now. I hope it's not something important. Darla didn't come to work today, did she? No, we really didn't expect this from her. Oh, really? Why is that? There was a long pause on the other end of the line. It was obvious that Margie was uncomfortable talking to me. Brian, I don't think I want to discuss any of this with you. I think you should talk to your wife. I would be glad, but I have no idea where she is. Another long pause followed. Brian, sorry, but I have a lot of work to do. I have to go. Before I could say anything else, she hung up. Suddenly, I had the feeling that there was something going on with the Prescott business that Darla didn't want me to know about. This explains why we no longer attend company events. She was afraid that someone would accidentally say or do something that might give her away, or make me believe that she was up to something bad. I grabbed a cold beer and went out onto the porch to think. I've noticed a few things over the last few months, but haven't given them much thought. Darla began working overtime several times a week, not to the point of waving red flags, but it has become commonplace. She stopped talking about work when she was at home, and we began to avoid communicating with anyone at the company. On the other hand, she has not changed her appearance or clothes. She didn't buy any new clothes or fancy underwear. As far as I remember, there were no suspicious phone calls or emails. I trusted my wife, so there was no reason to think twice about what she was doing. She's not at home was turning into a bitch and did not refuse me a romantic relationship. It's time to make some more phone calls. Donald Curry was an old high school friend of mine who worked at the courthouse. I didn't know what he did, but I knew he was involved with computers. I explained the problem to him and planned to meet him when he came home from work. Before leaving the house, I called Ronwell Home Builders and learned that Bob Gilson was working on an apartment complex nearby. I planned to meet him right after lunch. I usually finish my Taco Bell burrito, but today I only ate half of it. I couldn't wait to talk to Bob. When I arrived, the construction workers were still on their lunch break. Bob smiled and walked over to the car. He seemed much friendlier than Margie. Brian, I'm glad to see you. I assume you want to talk about Darla. Bob, I talked to Margie this morning, and she refused to tell me what was going on. You have to tell me everything man to man, without any nonsense. I liked Bob because he was a blue-collar guy like me, but I knew that if he tried to fool me, I would be angry. Brian, I usually don't pay attention to Margie when she starts gossiping about work, but that's all I know. Darla has been dating a married guy at the office for almost 6 months. They tried to keep it a secret, but soon everyone knew about it. Margie stopped talking to Darla when she found out, like many other girls. We missed you because of company business, but we figured Darla kept you out on purpose. That's all. I'm sorry, there's nothing more I can do for you. Do you know who this guy is? No, I wasn't paying enough attention. I can figure this out for you. Don't worry about it, Bob. I'll deal with this. For me, that pretty much sums it up. There was no misunderstanding. It was just a stupid husband who had no idea what was going on in his own home. 10 minutes later, I turned off her cell phone. Now she couldn't call home. I was returning home when I received a call on my cell phone. Cedar Rapids police found the Mustang parked in the bus station parking lot. The car was towed to the impound lot, and I could pick it up at any time for $300. I stopped by the police station and was given a printout of the report. The only conclusion I could draw was that Darla left the car and took the bus. I couldn't figure out where she went, but I assumed it was to the west. I didn't even know if she knew anyone in the area. I went to the bank, closed all the joint accounts, and opened new ones in my name only. I changed the beneficiary on my insurance policies to boys. I got to court early and drank too much before Donald arrived. Brian, there was a divorce hearing today, and Darla was called to testify. Of course, she didn't show up. Marcia Ridgway was divorcing her husband Kelsey, citing adultery. Mrs. Ridgway wanted Darla to testify that she was the woman with whom her husband committed adultery. So the divorce didn't go through without Darla's testimony. No, everything went as planned. It appears that Mrs. Ridgway had photographs, videos, and telephone records that supported her claim. She didn't really need Darla's confession. I think she was served only to embarrass her. Looks like it worked. What is Darla's status now? The best I can say is that no one cares anymore. She can't say anything new, and it doesn't matter. Kelsey Ridgway more or less confessed to everything after his wife's lawyer presented all the evidence. The judge immediately granted the divorce claim. The final decision will be made in 6 months. He is accused of embezzling child support. Did he have children? 3, and all under 10 years old. He will pay for this mistake for a long time. Donald and I talked for a while until he asked permission to go home to his family. I thanked him for his help and asked the bartender to bring me coffee. I was about to grab one of the red pickled eggs from the jar on the bar, but then I remembered the leftovers from the party. I drank a little more than I should have, but I still managed to get home without killing myself or anyone else. Under the circumstances, it was a stupid move. I wrapped 6 ribs in foil and popped them in the oven while I showered. By the time I returned to the kitchen, all that was left was a pile of bones. Todd and Terry returned home and immediately got to work on the pork. They gave my leg a little tug and then took a second batch out of the oven. Todd was delighted with the Mustang situation. After 20 minutes of discussion, I finally agreed to let both boys take the bus to Cedar Rapids and drive the car home. I gave them $600 to cover expenses. Terry wrote a note on the computer giving me permission to take the car and drive it home. He seemed to know what he was doing, so I said nothing and signed it. The next morning, we all had breakfast, and I took them to the bus station. I giggled slightly as they boarded the bus. They had no idea what 2 days at the Greyhound would be like. It was a great life lesson. I called the Cedar Rapids Police Department to have them waiting. They promised that there would be no problems. There was one more thing I had to take care of. It didn't take me long to figure out where Kelsey Ridgway's office was. When Margie saw me, she immediately reached for her phone. It was too late. I didn't even bother to introduce myself. Before I knew what had happened, I was at the police station in front of a judge and on my way to the county jail. There was no trial, just the judge and me. I got 60 days, but I didn't care. At the first opportunity, I called the guys and brought them up to date. I could have sworn I heard Terry laughing on the phone. The house could easily stand empty for several days. Well, things weren't exactly like they show on TV. I mean, it wasn't a walk in the park. but I didn't feel like my life was on the line. Basically, it was a bunch of nasty farts who didn't know how to get along with others, and a bunch of stupid kids. Children and farts didn't communicate much. There was no question of a separate chamber. I ended up sharing a cell with a 300-pound gorilla named Jocko, who beat his wife when he caught her in bed with his brother. I didn't know what happened to my brother. Jocko and I got along great. I, of course, took the top bunk. The cafeteria had more carbs than I liked, and Jocko was more than willing to help me with what I didn't want. Apart from the fact that he farted more than any other man on the staff, he was the perfect cellmate. 3 days later, Terry and Todd visited me. The car haul trip was great, but they didn't want any bus trips in the near future. They had no information about Kelsey or their mother. They brought me 2 packs of cigarettes, even though I don't smoke. Todd said he thought they might be useful for trading. He's watched too many movies. Jocko, however, was overjoyed when I gave them to him. He said he needed to smoke to lose weight. I had no problem leaving the boys at home alone, and apparently no one else did either. Todd left for school a week before I got out of prison. He took the minibus and left the Jeep with Terry. Terry and I celebrated my homecoming by going to Red Lobster. He was excited to start his final year of high school. Unfortunately, he had to go through this without me. I had other plans. Margie couldn't believe her eyes when I walked past her desk the next morning. I winked at her and headed straight to Kelsey's office again. 3 hours later, I was back on the bus heading to the county jail. This time for 6 months. Terry thought it was funny and immediately called his brother in College Station. Jocko welcomed me with open arms. Ugh. I handled Kelsey better this time. I was fired from my job, big surprise. I had enough money stashed away to pay for the house and cover living expenses. Terry took care of everything with no problem. Apart from Terry, the rest of my family visited me regularly. Terry made sure I always had cigarettes for Jocko. Darla's sisters came to see me and expressed their sympathy. Neither they nor any other family members had heard anything about Darla. In fact, we celebrated Thanksgiving and Christmas in prison as a family. I was still a month away from release when I lost Jocko. In fact, I didn't lose him. He was just released before me. His wife and brother moved to Florida, and he had no idea what he was going to do. Terry thought it would be great if Jocko stayed with him until he got settled. He offered him a job at a tree trimming company, but Jocko decided he would be better off moving to the south, where it was warmer. I was thinking about Florida. The night before Jocko left, Kelsey Ridgway was found beaten in a downtown alley. He told police he had been attacked by a monkey. I thought it was funny because I had an airtight alibi. After I was released, I decided that I had had enough of hanging out with Kelsey. In fact, he no longer worked in the area, and I didn't want to look for him. I signed up for a course to learn how to drive large trailers. It wasn't much more difficult than the dump trucks I was used to. I had a few months to kill before Terry started attending Auburn, so I spent that time renovating the house. I wanted to sell it, but it was in both of our names, and I didn't want the extra hassle. No one has heard a word from Darla since she left. Terry took the Mustang to Alabama because it was a girl magnet. I was never really into it, but I wasn't as young and handsome as he was. I found a couple who wanted to buy a house with clouds above their heads. I wasn't sure what that meant, but they got a good deal on the price. Their lawyer assured them that Darla's signature was not needed, and I was not going to argue with them. I just wanted to get rid of it all. Simple and clear. I used the down payment to buy a trailer. Before I knew it, I was already on my way and free. I never got around to filing for divorce from Darla because I didn't see the need. I had no interest in getting married again. You don't meet many interesting women in prison, and Jocko steered me toward an alternative. It turned out that Darla wasn't interested in divorcing me either because I didn't receive a surprise in the mail. I had no problems finding a job. I wasn't in dire need of money, so I could be a little picky with my orders. I have never transported anything frozen, alive, toxic, or explosive. I also avoided traveling north of the Mason-Dixon line in the winter. It didn't take me long to learn the ins and outs of the craft, and I really enjoyed my new life. An interesting development occurred while I was delivering a load of farm equipment to South Dakota. It was June, so there were no problems with the weather. I unloaded my cargo and headed south, about 10 kilometers from Highway 90, when I stopped at the Belly Up Diner. It was a dump, but the parking lot was full of large trailers and cars. The highlight was the breakfast, which lasted all day and was second to none in size and taste. Most of the visitors were local, but a few truck drivers seemed to make a special stop here. I simply asked the waitress to bring my favorite dish and coffee. 3 large screen TVs were showing 3 different programs that no one was actually watching. The TV closest to me was showing mostly political advertisements, and one of them caught my attention. John Hemingway ran for the U.S. House of Representatives. He was handsome and seemed to have a sharp tongue. Standing to the side, dressed like Jackie Kennedy, with a big smile on her face, stood his new wife, Darla, my Darla. My thoughts were interrupted when the largest plate of food I had ever seen was placed in front of me. Here you go, big boy. Do you need anything else? Tabasco. The hot sauce was hidden behind the pepper shaker. Betsy, my waitress, chuckled softly as she moved it from its hidden place to my plate. Well, is that all now? Almost. Who is this woman standing next to this slick politician? She snorted slightly. This is Hemingway's new arm candy. He needed a wife so he could run for president. There were rumors that he wasn't straight, if you know what I mean. I started pouring Tabasco over the pile of food. She looks too old to be candy. I think you can't be too picky when you're in a hurry. Still, she's pretty, and I think older women make better lovers. Do you agree? She really looked good. Her blonde hair was now brown and looked like it had been styled in a fancy beauty salon. The makeup was flawless, and the dress fit her like a glove. It wasn't really a dress, more like a tailored suit. I looked up from the TV and noticed that my waitress had gone back to work. The food was great, and it was easy to see why the parking lot was packed. My coffee cup was filled twice before I cleared everything from my plate. The pie looked delicious, but I didn't have any room left. Betsy took my empty plate and placed the check in front of me. Will he win the elections? Not if we can help it. He has big money behind him from powerful people in Sioux Falls. No one here wants anything to do with him, but we don't have the votes or the money to stop him. I giggled as I pulled out my money clip. You know something, don't you? Are you sure they got married? Yes. They actually showed it on TV like it was a reality show or something. True, no honeymoon. They said they would wait until he took office. I was still smiling as I placed the 10 on the table. Mister, you better tell me this before you walk out the door. I don't look for trouble, and I don't stick my nose where it shouldn't. However, I would like to ask you a favor. What is this? Can I get a couple of hours of sleep before I get on the highway? No problem. I nodded in thanks and walked out the door, still smiling. Betsy watched from the window as I climbed into the car. I was just beginning to enjoy some well-deserved sleep when there was a knock on the door. I didn't pay attention to it for a few moments, but it didn't stop. Leave. They told me I could park for a couple of hours. Whoever it was didn't leave, so I had to open the door. Betsy said I need to talk to you. Do you have a few minutes? It was dark and raining. All I could see was a stern-looking woman in a poncho. I didn't break any laws. Leave me alone. Just give me 10 minutes. She looked determined. Sorry, lady, I'm not interested. Go get someone else. I'm not a woman of easy virtue. Damn it. I need to talk to you about Hemingway. Meet me inside in 10 minutes. That seemed to calm her down. She had a small smile on her face as she closed the door. It might have been better to just let her get into the car, even though she was soaking wet. As I put on my raincoat, I glanced at my watch. I only managed to sleep 3 hours. The restaurant was still quite crowded. Next to the door was a place where all the rain clothes were stored. In a couple of months, all this will turn into winter clothes and boots. She sat in a booth by the window with 2 cups of coffee in her hands. She had straight, shiny black hair with a small white streak on the side. Judging by her complexion, she was an active girl, tanned and not pampered. In fact, she couldn't even be called a girl. She was at least 35, maybe over 40. The whole look was completed with high cheekbones and no makeup. Sitting down, I extended my hand to her. Brian Connors. Sally Wilmot, do you want something to eat? No, thank you. I just ate the signature meal 3 hours ago. I don't think I'll be able to eat for a while. She responded with a polite smile. Betsy said you might know something about Darla Hemingway. I wanted to talk to you before you go. What the hell is so important about Darla Hemingway? My brother Franklin is running against him in the election. Oh, I see. This is a personal matter for everyone. Not really. Franklin represents the interests of local residents, farmers, ranchers, and Native Americans. Hemingway takes care of Sioux Falls businessmen. We're not anti-business, but we think a lot of people won't be thrilled if Hemingway gets elected. Okay, but I still don't understand what his wife has to do with all this. We don't know either. All we know is that something is wrong. Our election commission tried to conduct a background check on her, but ultimately got nothing. His campaign staff have not released any information about her. It may all be nonsense, but we were getting desperate, and Betsy said she thought you might know something. I think I better not become a professional poker player if the waitress can see through me so easily. She leaned back in her chair. Aha, she was right. You really know something. Are you going to tell me, or am I going to have to beat it out of you? I finished my coffee and smiled. I found her words funny. It was actually really funny. I waved the empty cup at Betsy and leaned forward. I think I like the second option better. I have no idea what made me say that. It was not in my nature to be clever or use innuendo. It was probably because I liked her behavior. She was confident and straightforward. I got the impression that she always knew what she wanted and knew how to get it. Betsy finished pouring and Sally Wilmot looked at me intently. Sorry, it was rude and impolite of me to say that. I will answer any questions you may have. Sally covered her mouth with her hand and laughed quietly. It's okay, Mr. Connors. I'm not that impressionable, and I thought your answer was cute. I shouldn't have asked the question that way. Oh, good. This means that the second option is still valid. No, damn it. How do you know Darla Hemingway? She is my wife. We have been married for over 20 years and have never divorced. I haven't seen her in years, but unless she got divorced somewhere I don't know about, we're still married. Sally seemed at a loss for words. She didn't say anything at all. She just sat and looked at me. What was her maiden name when she got married? She paused for a few seconds before speaking. My God. Her maiden name was Connors. The bitch didn't even try to hide it. Hooray! Of course, Betsy ran up to me, and all the heads in the room turned in our direction. I was a little embarrassed by the attention, but Sally seemed delighted. Sally jumped up and kissed Betsy right on the lips. She crossed the foyer and took out her cell phone. Betsy blushed slightly and leaned towards me. What the hell did you tell her? I haven't seen her this excited for 5 years. That sneaky ass that had been hiding inside me for years began to emerge. I looked at Betsy and said, I told her that you are my love and that I am going to get married. She immediately realized it was a joke and hit me on the hand as a reward. Are you going to tell me? No, let Sally tell you. I'm going to go back to my car and see if I can get back to work. It was nice meeting you, Betsy. The rain stopped, but I still didn't make it to the trailer. Sally grabbed my hand when I was halfway there. You can't leave yet. You should talk to Franklin. It does not take a lot of time. Just a few minutes. I would really like to stop all this. Now I regret what I said to you. How long will it take him to get here? He will meet us at my house. Do you want to come with me, or will you follow me in your truck? I'll follow you. I felt better when I didn't have to depend on someone else's transportation. The Jeep van Sally was driving was at least 10 years old, possibly older. After driving 3 kilometers on gravel, we found ourselves on a worn gravel road leading to an equally worn house. Someone was there because the place was well lit. There was no lawn, only gravel, and not very much at that. I tried to stay away from the dirt, but it was difficult. There were no other cars nearby, so I assumed Franklin was still on his way. Just inside the door was a place to store outerwear and boots. This seemed like a good idea, especially since there was already a lot of outerwear and boots there. It was an interesting layout, mainly because it felt more like a classroom than a living room. Instead of bedside tables, there were desks. There were computers instead of table lamps, and 3 teenagers were looking right at me. "Hi, guys. This is Brian. He's here to help Uncle Franklin." Sally went into the kitchen and started making coffee. I nodded slightly to my audience instead of saying hello. I felt a little awkward under these circumstances. I looked around the room, but saw nothing to indicate the presence of Mr. Wilmot. Since I had 2 sons, it was easy for me to determine that the boys were about the same age. I guessed they were 16, 17, and 18. There was no TV or music in the room. All 3 seemed to be either working on the computer or reading a book. The strange thing was that they did not look smart or boring, but seemed like normal, strong, and active children. "Brian, these are my sons. The oldest is Tracy, the next is Tyler, and the youngest is Tanner." Each of them in turn smiled and nodded at me. I couldn't help but smile, and my amusement became obvious. I understood. It's a little strange that we gave them names that all started with the letter T. No, it's not something that amuses me. I just have 2 sons named Todd and Terry. I thought it was one hell of a coincidence. Tyler was the first of the boys to speak. "Where are your sons?" His mother gave him a stern look for this question, which he seemed to ignore. "Todd studies at the University of Texas, and Terry studies at Auburn." This simple statement lit up the entire room. Suddenly, Tracy came to life as if he had been stunned by the Energizer Bunny. "I'm leaving for College Station in August. How long did he stay there? What is he learning?" Sally finally touched his shoulder. "Slow down, boy, slow down. I'm sure Mr. Connors will have time to answer all your questions." As it turned out, Tracy had a full football scholarship and was already enrolled in college. Tyler was accepted into the United States Naval Academy in Annapolis and graduated within a year. Sally's husband served in the National Guard and was killed in the Persian Gulf 5 years ago. She didn't go into detail, and I didn't insist. Tanner, the youngest of the boys, had not yet decided what he wanted to do, but his mother still made sure he regularly studied with his textbooks. I had no idea what was keeping Franklin, but for the next hour I was busy talking with Sally's sons about everything under the sun. Sally just stood back and watched as I interacted with them, just as I interacted with my own. Spending time with Sally's children made me realize how much I miss my boys. Finally, Franklin Honeycutt arrived with 2 assistants. After the show, Sally returned the boys to work while the adults gathered around the kitchen table. Apparently, they had some doubts about my claim to be Darla's husband, and it was not important enough for me to enter into an argument about it. As I got up to leave, I thanked Sally for the coffee and told the boys it was nice meeting them. Sally didn't want any part of it. "Damn it, Brian, sit down." The rest of the table sat in silence. Sally took over the conversation as if she were the one running for president. "Brian, do you have a marriage certificate or something like that proving that you are married to Darla Hemingway?" It only took me a few seconds to pull the wedding photo out of my wallet. She was older now and had different hair, but she was still recognizable as Darla. I looked at one of Franklin's assistants, who was sitting with a laptop in front of him. "Visit the Berks County, Pennsylvania archives. You should be able to log into the marriage registration system from 1960 to 1990. Just search for my name, Brian William Connors. Sally brought me a fresh cup of coffee and smiled slightly. She seemed glad I didn't leave. Assistant number 1 turned the laptop screen towards Franklin. August 17, 1979, right? Franklin seemed to cheer up a little. I nodded and took a sip of fresh beer. I wish you luck in finding any evidence of divorce. As far as I know, or anyone else knows, I'm still married. Feel free to investigate this matter as much as you like. It doesn't matter to me. The conversation started to become a little redundant and boring. This time, no one stopped me when I stood up. Do you mind if I stop for a couple of minutes on your road before leaving? No, not at all. Sally walked me to the door. I turned around to say goodbye to Franklin and his cronies, but they were deeply engrossed in what politicians were doing. Each of the boys gave me a small wave or nod as I walked away. An hour later, I heard Franklin and his group leaving. I decided I was finally ready for bed when I heard another knock on the door. Sally jumped into the cabin wearing a flannel nightgown. She put her finger to her lips, indicating that she didn't want me to talk. We were far enough from the house that the boys couldn't hear anything, but I think she just didn't want to talk. She spent at least an hour with me in the sleeping car. She left as quietly as she came. Not a word was spoken. The sun had already risen when they started knocking on the door again. It was Tanner calling me to come inside for breakfast. Luckily, boys and men like the same food, and Sally knew how to cook it. I spent another hour chatting with the guys and felt quite comfortable. So much so that he asked Sally's permission to take a warm shower before leaving. An hour later, I was finally on my way, but not for long. The local sheriff stopped me before I got on the highway. Looks like Mr. Honeycutt needed to talk to me a little more. I followed the police car back to the belly where Franklin was waiting for me. He was having breakfast and invited me to join him. Betsy brought me coffee and took the opportunity to wink at me. She and Sally must have been closer friends than I thought. Apparently, Franklin's legal advisors wanted me to stay. I used the old cliché, time is money line to dissuade him, but he just laughed and continued eating. It would have been very easy to agree to everything and then just run away, but I decided that I might want to stay a few more days, especially after last night. The politician paid for the motel room and food, but it was the best he could do. It was a good opportunity for me to wash my clothes and also pay my bank bills. Wi-Fi is excellent. I sent the guys a couple of emails and paid all the bills. I was just taking the second batch out of the dryer when Sally came in. I don't think I've ever seen a woman who looked better in jeans. She had 3 children and still had a perfect figure. Her blue Oxford shirt was not tucked in, but was belted with a silver belt. Her skin was shiny, not from sweat, but from a natural glow. She was one hell of an attractive woman. "What the hell are you doing, Brian?" I shrugged innocently. "I'm folding laundry." "You were supposed to be gone. Remember you said you were leaving this morning? Everything has changed. Your brother asked me to stay a few more days. The only reason I came to see you last night was because I thought you wouldn't be here today. I can't see you here after." She hesitated, searching for words. She didn't seem to expect anything more than a one-night stand and had no idea how to handle it. I was amused by her disappointment and decided that this was an opportunity to have a little fun. After my conversation with Franklin this morning, I'm seriously thinking about buying a house and staying here forever. Coming from him, it sounded quite convincing. Now I recognize bullshit by the smell. What's really going on? I sat Sally down on the bench next to the dryers. Your brother insisted that I stay a few more days, just until they can prepare something to hook Hemingway. I promised to stay away from you and the boys until he's done. I didn't want to embarrass you or do anything that might make you feel awkward. That's not the problem, Brian. Boys like you. They wanted to know when you could come again. They were a little upset when I told them you were leaving. Tyler wanted me to talk to you about staying here a little longer. Sorry, I was just trying to be friendly. They reminded me of my family, and it was easy for me to talk to them. I didn't mean to cause problems for you. Of course, I didn't make things any easier when I walked up to your truck last night. You definitely made things complicated. For this hint, I received a poke in the shoulder and a smile. Why did you come to see me? Sally shrugged and looked a little embarrassed. I'm not sure. 5 years have passed since my husband died. 5 years without any comfort or passion. It just seemed like the perfect opportunity, especially since you were supposed to be leaving today. She started to get annoyed with me again. Why didn't you leave? Damn it. I grabbed a stack of folded laundry, gave it to her, and then grabbed the rest before heading back to my motel room. She hesitated in the doorway for a moment until I put my finger to my mouth like she did last night. Her shy smile was followed by a wide grin as she closed the door behind her. Dinners at Sally's became a regular occurrence, and Betsy became my best ally. Betsy and Sally have been friends since childhood. Betsy took great pleasure in telling me about the things they did when they were little, and about the boys. They fooled. The conversations about Sally's husband were sad and not nearly as light-hearted, but they gave me a good idea of who Sally was and why I wanted to get to know her better. It was never my intention to stay in South Dakota, but the longer I was here, the more I wanted to stay. By the end of the first week, all the boys had Texas A&M jerseys and Auburn jerseys. Sally kept one of the Auburn t-shirts for herself. It was still too big for Tanner. I didn't pay much attention to the political squabbles. Franklin and his team seemed to be doing just fine without me. One way or another, the press found out about Darla's dark past and began to blow it up. Hemingway's people tried unsuccessfully to ignore it. The more they denied or ignored it, the worse it got. His popularity began to decline rapidly. I never got involved in any business until one day, early one morning, they suddenly came to my motel. The woman standing at my door was tall, blonde, and straight as a pole. I was still in my underpants, but I invited her in anyway. She avoided my gaze as I pulled on my jeans, but I watched her every move. She was wearing a dark suit with a white shirt and black low-heeled shoes. She was definitely a professional in her field. I wanted to take a leak and drink a cup of coffee, but instead I forced myself to sit at the small table that comes standard in every American motel room. My name is Mary Beth Steinmetz. I'm an attorney with Levitt's Brothers in Sioux Falls. I assume you are Brian William Connors? She knew my middle name. This was not good. Sorry, I'll go away for a minute. I got up and went to the bathroom. Although I closed the door, I was sure that the noise I made when the water entered the toilet was noticed. I was going to wait a little, but I felt that this pompous bitch needed a little humiliation. In less than a minute, I returned to the table. Was it necessary? No, but from your tone, I realized that we will be here for some time. Sorry, but I was just trying to be professional. You missed it. What the hell do you want? Our company represents the interests of John Hemingway. We recently learned that your marriage to Darla Connors was never properly dissolved, and we were hoping to rectify that issue. How? The state has laws that allow marriages to be quickly dissolved under certain circumstances. We believe that we can take advantage of these laws with your assistance. Are you telling me to divorce my wife? Yes. Why should I do this? My guest seemed puzzled. I don't think she expected this answer. At this point, I would be happy with a divorce, but on my terms, and I didn't want her to know about it. Steinmetz just sat there and looked at me. Miss Steinmetz, could you please tell me in simple terms why my wife and I no longer live together? Don't sugarcoat it and be completely honest. If you can do this, I will think about continuing our conversation. She leaned back and undid the top button of her blouse. 3 years ago, your wife had an affair with a colleague. When you found out about this, she ran away because she could no longer face you and her sons. She hasn't spoken to any of you since then. Is this clear enough to you? This is good. Actually, you hit the nail on the head. So what's the problem? If you've been following the news, you know that Darla and Mr. Hemingway got into a little trouble. We can't undo what was done, but we hope to make things a little easier by filing her a quick divorce. That's right. And tell me again, what will I get from this? Freedom. Damn it, I'm happy with the way things are now. You will have to show me how my life can be better and not the same as before. What do you want, Mr. Connors? Do you need money? How many? Give me something to work with. What terms of divorce do you propose? There are none of them. That's why it can be done so quickly. No money changes hands, property is not subject to division, and there are no custody issues. You both walk away with what you have, and neither of you owes the other anything. Everything is pure and final. How long will it take? Less than 90 days. Does this mean that the decision will be made before the elections? Yes, I think so. She admitted it, but didn't want to play along. Should I see my wife? No. In fact, we'd rather you didn't. Should I stay here until this is all over? This question brought a sigh from my guest. Yes. Fine. I will agree to this on one condition. You must pay for my room and board until everything is completed. A smile suddenly appeared on Mary Beth Steinmetz's face. I could tell it was better than she expected. I probably could have hyped it up for a little more money, but for now, just being free would be nice. I can prepare the documents and send them to you for signature this afternoon. You do not mind? Great. I need to talk to my lawyer, but I don't think there will be any problems. I didn't have a lawyer, but I wanted to consult with Franklin first. Your lawyer? Give me your business card. I promise to call you if he doesn't like anything. If they don't call you, bring me the documents. I was glad it was over because I needed breakfast. I walked her to the door, barefoot, jeans, and no shirt. As she pulled away, I saw Sally on the other side of the parking lot. Before I could wave to her, she sped off down the road. Having quickly shaved, I got dressed and headed to the belly. Betsy looked at me sternly as she handed me coffee. Do I have a chance to explain everything? Not for me, Mr. Connors. You better come up with a good story for Sally. Breakfast was hot, but company was cold. I finished it as quickly as I could and called Franklin. He was out of town, but we talked for about 20 minutes. He was delighted with the whole situation and advised me to continue as I was, but to make sure I had copies of all documents. He spoke as if he was in control of the situation, no matter how it unfolded. I asked him to call Sally on my behalf. He was still laughing when he hung up. There was a large power wash near Interstate 90. I spent at least an hour steam cleaning and vacuuming the car, then hand waxing it. This took another hour. It would have been easier to just pay and get it done, but I needed therapy. Before heading back, I grabbed a bite to eat at Cracker Barrel. I managed to avoid Betsy's wrath. This time she parked right outside my room door. Sally got out of the Jeep as I pulled up, looking a little embarrassed. It was easy to see from the look on her face that Franklin had called her. She spent the next 2 hours apologizing to me. Sometimes feeling guilty is useful. When she left, Miss Steinmetz returned with papers to sign. For some reason, she also made me accept a check for $10,000. Hemingway's campaign continued to flounder, but my divorce petition made it through the legal system. Tracy now lived in College Station and had a girlfriend who looked after him. I officially got divorced just before the election. Franklin won and promised to repay me for my help. I didn't feel like I did anything wrong, but I told him I would give it up even if he gave me his sister. For this, Sally hit me on the arm again. Things weren't going well for Darla. After the election, someone decided to accuse her of bigamy anyway. Before they could do anything, she simply disappeared. She was good at it. I never got to see her or talk to her. I sold the truck and bought a house with a small gravel pit near Huron. Sally and I got married on Christmas Day, and all 5 of my sons were there. Betsy moved to Doublewide and promised to take good care of him. An ultrasound showed that we were having a girl. Does anyone know any good girl names that start with the letter T? Subscribe to our channel so that your second chaff doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think about listening to the next one.